Hey, Mr. Holder here. I need to get in focus here. I need to see what's going on with the camera. It's kind of freaking out. We're here talking live. It's Turbo Tuesday, and we are going to talk about all things turbocharging. So if you have questions, we're going to do a Q&A session. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know what you have questions on. But today I want to pose the following question, just because it's a question I get a lot when I get emails and comments and stuff. And that's it's because we were all brought up this way, and I'm no different. I heard this time and time again. So the question is, what is more responsive, a single turbo or twin turbos? And let me know what you guys think. The age old, if you look up any of this information in the old books and magazines and stuff that I used to read, the age old thing is, yo, William, what's up? The age-old thing is that two small turbos are a lot more responsive than a big single turbo. And I want you guys to tell me what you think. Do you guys think that two turbos, for some reason, are going to be more responsive than a big single turbo? And obviously, the first thing I can say about that is, well, before I do anything, we have to hydrate, because it's very important to have enough liquid in your diet. So this is just water. So cheers to everybody for drinking their water. It's very important. So what do you guys think? Twin turbos more responsive than a single turbo? Let me know what you guys think. I'll tell you my take on it. And this is what I tell everybody when they ask me about it. The problem is that, first of all, there's nothing that's defining each one of these turbo sizes. And here's what I tell people. If you size turbos, twin turbos and a single turbo, if you size them the same so that they both do the same thing, I think the response will be the same. I don't think that there's any benefit from having two small turbos being fed by half of the motor compared to a single turbo being fed by one. Here's what I can say. Normally when we run, I've run twin turbos a lot. I've run single turbos a lot. Done endless dyno testing on all kinds of motors. And if you guys haven't taken a look at it, you guys better get over and take a look at the video I just posted where we ran an S480 turbo on 4 different combinations. That video is up now. So make sure to take a look at it and go ahead and watch it and support the channel. But here's what I can tell you. Every time I've run singles and twins, it's always dictated not by the fact that I ran a single or a twin, but by the turbo sizing itself. So again, if you have two small turbos and they flow the same amount and will make the same amount of power as a big single, my opinion is that you will have the same response for both of them. But here's what has happened when I've run these turbos, and it almost makes me lean more toward the single turbo being maybe more responsive. Whenever I've run singles versus twins, and I haven't done an exact thing where I've sized the twins exactly like the single, but when we run twins, it's almost always lower back pressure than the single. And again, I haven't put two small GT35s, which might be about 1,000 horsepower turbo, and compared them to a single 1,000 horsepower turbo like an S475 or something to find out exactly what the response rate is, which is what I'll have to do. So Tim, what? See, Tim thinks twin turbo should be more responsive because there's shorter tubing and more heat in the pipe. Other than that, that's not a difference. That's an interesting perspective. Maybe because there's less time for the heat to go out of the exhaust system. Maybe that's the case. What if we wrap the exhaust? What if it's coated? Honestly, and I get that question a lot too. And but let me know what you guys think about singles and twins. I know we've all been brought up to think that two small turbos somehow is more effective. And I just don't get the math there. Like I said, if we size them the same so that they both do the same things, I don't know how two small turbos is going to be any more responsive than one big turbo. So let me know what you guys think. And then the other question I get a lot on this stuff is, what about the effectiveness? And this goes to the big thing that I want to worry about and the small things that we want to worry about, or the small things that the guys on the internet want to argue about. And that's for things like, guys have asked me all the time about, what about wrapping the headers or ceramic coating them? And all of that stuff is a good idea. But normally when you see that stuff, it's not so that they improve turbo response. It's more so that you get rid of the heat in the surrounding area. Like if you've ever run a turbo, if you've ever seen one run on the dyno, especially when we turn the lights off, the exhaust is glowing orange hot. If it gets really bad, if you don't have a lot of timing in it, it'll glow like almost white hot. You can almost see through the exhaust manifolds. It gets so bad. So it's really, really hot. So that heat radiates to everything, to plug wires and hoses and all kinds of things that are in the surrounding area. And nothing likes to be near anything else that is 1,000 degrees or more. So obviously, I think coating that is a good idea. Keeping that heat in gets it all to the turbo, but mostly it keeps it away from other things that don't want to be hot. So let me know what you guys think about that also. Do you think that ceramic coating or wrapping the headers or the exhaust is a good idea? Do you think that that will improve the heat energy to the turbo and therefore the response of the turbo? Let me know what you guys think. I haven't seen that, and I actually haven't done that back-to-back test to find out if we got the exact amount of heat in the turbo and then ran a back-to-back test and then did that with after wrapping the header to find out if that's really a thing. Let me know what you guys think. I'm kind of curious because today it's Turbo Tuesday and it's all about, let's talk turbo. So let's find out what you guys think. I'm going to go back and try to read some of these comments and see what you guys have to say, what's going on. A 6.8 liter V10 is responsive, yes, and I can't wait to try one of those. I'm going to get a Triton V10 and I'm going to run it under boost. And I haven't told anybody about it, I don't think, but I also have a custom intake manifold that I'm doing for the V10. Even if it doesn't add any power, at the very least, the V10 should look super cool. And this is kind of a fabricated aluminum one, so it will definitely look super cool. Oh, Tim, yeah, you skipped the advertising. Nice. Thanks for the support, man. Really appreciate it. Okay, what do we got going on? Twinned mainly because the small turbos need less inertia to spin. That's true, but Adam, here's something to think about. Now, although the smaller turbo you think will spool up quicker, it also has only half of the exhaust energy going to it. So if it's a small turbo, if it's half the size, it has half the exhaust energy, does that mean that it spins up at exactly the same amount? It's an interesting question. Twins at 8 PSI work less as hard as a single pushing 16 PSI. No, I don't think that's accurate. It's worth using junkyard diesel turbos on a gas engine. Yeah, Shane, I have used whole set turbos a lot on stuff back in the day when I was doing the stuff with the guys from HP Performance, and those are basically diesel turbos. So yes, you can do that. And any turbo that you go get, if you get exhaust energy to it, it will provide boost to the motor. So, and if it's cheap, that's obviously even better. And you get it from a wreck yard. That's great. David, have a drink on me. Yes, that again, that's water. I'm hydrating. So it's very important to hydrate because that's, that keeps you safe. I want to put 262 millimeter turbos on an LS3. Yes, that will definitely work. It depends on your power output. For me, that's what the thing is. It's less about, obviously you want to look at response rate if this is something that you're driving around or you have to have good response rate. You want to look at that. But ultimately, the turbos that you choose are kind of be dictated by what kind of power output you want. So if you need to make 1,000 horsepower, you have to have a single turbo that will make 1,000 horsepower or two twins that will make 500 horsepower apiece. So it's very important to get those turbos sized that way. And then you can play with the exhaust side, like I talked about in the S480 video. If you're putting an S480 on a 4.8, you want a different hot side than you might if you're putting it on a 408 stroke or LS or a 454 big block Chevy. Even though the compressor side might be the same, you'll probably want a different hot side to improve that response rate. Yo, Gary, good evening. Twin turbos. I want to know how, nasty Chevys, I want to know how to determine when a certain engine setup, engine and turbo size will spool. There's no math for that, although guys that have done it a lot, like I have lots of test data to take a look at and tell you when things did spool on certain engine combinations. And I can kind of tell you that if you tell me the best thing for you to do, nasty Chevys, is to tell me what kind of power you want. And then we can work backward from there and determine how we get the spool rate. Hit my mic over here. Then we can determine what kind of spool rate we can get from that power output, because that's ultimately what we're looking at. Birdman and Larry Lawson would tell you that twins are a lot better. Yes, they definitely they both know how to make power, but they're trying to make like big pro mod kind of power. And that's kind of a different thing. Twin turbo should be more responsive, Tim. Any Nova updates? Actually, I've been working on the trunk of the Nova. What I want to do is I've been wire brushing it to try to get some of the surface rust, and I found out that it's not just surface rust, it's actually rust. But what I want to do is do the splatter paint in the trunk to make sure that that's okay. And then as I was leaning over the trunk, I noticed that all of the weather stripping in the trunk is bad. So now I want to at least change that weather stripping. And then when I change that, I'm thinking, hey, I need to order weather stripping basically for the whole car, because if I'm just going to get one piece, I may as well get a whole kit. And that's how projects are. I just need a radiator cap. I don't know, that radiator looks kind of rusty. And the support, I look at those motor mounts. The motor mounts are terrible. You know what? Since the motor is going to be out, I might as well freshen up the motor, and yada, 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 on and on and on. That's how small projects turn into very big projects. A certain power level. So if we have twin GT35s, we can make, let's say, 1,000 horsepower, because those are about 500 horsepower turbos, at least the eBay versions are. And if we have a single 475, or a 7875 Gen 2 from Byron, shout out to the guys at Byron and the guys at Yes Racing. If we have that kind of turbo, that's about 1,000 horsepower turbo. So we know what that is. And so we have that. Okay, we have to make 1,000 horsepower. And is that a big turbo? For a lot of guys, that's not. For Larry Larson, obviously, that's not a big turbo unless he's using 4 of them. So again, that's the thing. What is a big turbo and what is a small turbo? If you have a big single turbo like a 105 or 110 or 120 or 200 or whatever size big turbo you have, then you have to figure out how to spool that. Because if you're trying to make 2,000 horsepower from a 5.3 liter, first of all, I would suggest that you step up in displacement, because it'd be a lot easier to spool a turbo up. But you have to work on ways to get that thing to spool up. Obviously, nitrous is an option, and there are other ways to do it too. But if you're going to that extreme, you have to figure out ways to do that. And maybe twins are a better way to go. There's a lot of things that you have to do to go to the extremes. In the area that I'm talking about of normal street strip kind of applications, 1,000 horsepower, or even now a little bit beyond that, it's pretty easy to get an LS to work. It's harder to get a 4.8 liter to work with a S480 turbo, let's say, than it is with an S475 or 7875 or a GT45. It's easier to get a 6 liter to do that. So again, your combination can help you make the turbo more efficient for any given power level. And rotary guys, I feel your pain. Having done a couple of turbo rotary things on the chassis dyno, that's a really hard turbo. I mean, although they produce a lot of heat energy, which helps the turbo response, but for guys that are trying to make big power from a relatively small rotary engine, it gets more and more difficult. It's like trying to make my 1 liter sprint motor make 500 or 1,000 horsepower. It gets really difficult when the motor's really small and the power needs are really big. Does heat affect spool rate? In my opinion, it does. And Aiden Sparling, and I'll tell you why. If I run 2 back-to-back runs on the same motor without changing the booster, the air fuel, or the timing, the turbo response will improve on the second run. And all it does is have more heat energy in the exhaust and the turbo. So that tells me that heat improves of the turbo. So if you guys have a different opinion, let me know about that. And that's what I've seen when I've done testing. When you do the 6.8 liter V10, put an 80 millimeter turbo on it. We're probably going to put twins on that, only because the intake manifold, Big Hirsch, only because the intake manifold that I have is a twin inlet manifold. That's right, dual plenum, 2 dual throttle bodies. And the other thing I have, which is really cool, it's been sitting around for a long time, back from the guys when I was doing stuff with the guys from HP Performance, is I have an air-to-air intercooler that is a 2 in and 2 out. And I want to use that for symmetry, if nothing else. Obviously, ideally, I'd like to use an air-to-water intercooler because it's much easier on the chassis dyno. But this just looks cool, and it will look really cool on a twin-turbo V10. I can send you a graph of my twin GT35s on LQ4, Robert, and that's cool, except I don't have anything to compare that to. I don't have your motor and your combination run with a single, so it doesn't give me too much data. It just tells me what yours did, which is cool, and I'm always up for looking at dyno data, but I don't compare that, and I don't ever do that on somebody else's dyno or another chassis dyno or any of that. I don't compare that to stuff that I have because I don't really think that that's accurate. I want to put a turbo LS in a boat. Justin, you need to be more specific. What size do you want? What power output do you want? What RPM do you want? Is it an outdrive? Is it a jet? There's a lot of concerns there. If twins is lower back pressure, the engine needs less work to push exhaust out. Yeah, lower back pressure is good. The problem is, as you lower the back pressure, you also lower the response rate of the turbo. So that's also something to think about. Big twins are always more fun. I'm in agreement with you there. And I have a twin story that not something I could tell online though. Loading an engine on the dyno doesn't really represent off throttle response. I agree with you. And I've told that to people again and again. But the engine dyno actually is not really a good place to measure response. The chassis dyno is a little bit better, but obviously, ultimately, the street or the track is kind of the best place to tell that, because anybody that has any turbo experience knows that your boost response will be different in the different gears because the load is different. So, in first gear, it might be really hard to light off a big turbo, but second gear, it gets a little better. Third gear, a little bit better. And if you're able to load that thing and really get going in fifth or sixth gear, it can make a lot of power. I wouldn't wrap the pipe. You will mummify the headers, ceramic coating for the win. Yeah, I agree. Ceramic coating is much better. And I've seen people wrap their, especially mild steel headers, and they don't last very long. they turn into nothing. On a large motor, big single or twins doesn't really matter. Twins are a lot cooler. I agree. I like the symmetry of twins. It's hard to get a single turbo to mount right in the center so it has good symmetry. Twins, big twins, always better. Nasty Chevys, one big turbo is good, two smalls is better, and two bigs is even better. I agree. Inertia of the wheels, and that's an interesting conversation. What do you guys think? In my opinion, the response rate of the turbo is less about the weight of the wheel than it is about the amount of exhaust energy that you can get to the wheel. But again, let me know what you guys think. This is a discussion. I'm not standing up here and telling you I know everything about turbos. I've tested everything. I mean, I've done a lot of testing in 25 years. But when somebody has a specific question that I haven't tested, all I can give you is my opinion. And again, we know what opinions are worth. That's why we're here. That's why we're having this discussion. That's why it's Let's Talk Turbos. It's not Richard's going to talk about turbos and all you guys are going to listen, because that's no fun. Nobody has any fun, no matter how much we do with our hydration. 700 CFM in the throttle body is 700 CFM out of the exhaust. That's an interesting point. Twins are just aesthetically more pleasing. What about single versus twins on an off-road truck? I think it all comes down to what your desired power is, and then you size the turbo for your desired power, and then you work back to the amount of response rate that you want. If you have two 500 horsepower turbos, that you can mean 1,000 horsepower with both. Yeah, if you have two 500 horsepower turbos and you're running twins, those will combine together to have the airflow of 1,000 horsepower. I've heard of seeing through the turbo. I know I've run turbo combinations with mild steel exhaust manifolds where it looked like I could actually see the exhaust flowing through the manifold because it got so hot that it sure, to me, and I was taking video of it, and it looks really cool because I was watching the fire come out of the wastegate as the wastegate opens, which is like, super cool. But it looked to me, if you look really closely, that you could actually see the exhaust flowing. And maybe that was parts of the valve or the piston or something flowing in the exhaust manifold. And again, all this stuff, just super awesome, which is why I'm so excited about when I run these turbo things on the dyno. Tim, the first advertisement I got was 5 minutes long. Well, you can't sit through a 5-minute ad. Honestly, I wouldn't either. I'm obviously not in charge of whatever ads they're putting on the YouTube thing. That's not my deal. But yeah, I don't. That's why I tape everything. I don't watch anything on live TV. I can't sit through ads. And although that's how obviously YouTube makes their money, and I'm happy just to be part of all this. And I'm amazed that it's going as well as it has, and it's worked so well and grown so big in this last year. I'm very happy that I did it. Happy for all you guys watching and giving me your input, because for the longest time, for the last 25 years, since 1989, I've been writing magazine stories, and let me tell you, it's no picnic doing that for a living. I mean, it's not like I was working at a coal mine, but still, it has its problems. Sequential turbo, a North American Rattler. I've seen you post a lot of stuff, and I'm glad you're here. Sequential turbos are really cool, and I would like to have a sequential system. The problem is that the plumbing to make a sequential system work, where you run a little turbo and direct all the exhaust energy to the little turbo, and then you have a flapper valve or something, and then start directing, and once the thing spools up and starts making power and has enough exhaust energy to light up the big turbo, then you direct all that exhaust energy to the big turbo. So you have a little one for response, and then you have a big one for the top end, and it's kind of like the VTEC of turbo systems, and it's a really good idea, but it's very complicated, both on the hot side, having direct the exhaust from one to the other or to both, and then on the inlet side also to not have the big turbo backfeed into the small turbo. So it's a lot of plumbing work. If you've ever seen a Mazda RX-7 or a Toyota Supra, there's a lot going on there, and but it is cool. I sent you a message on Facebook message. Nicholas, I'm sure I got it. I answer. That's one thing. This is very important to me, both on YouTube and Facebook and Instagram. When somebody makes a comment or something, I always respond to the comments, and I respond to all the messages. If I haven't, please send it again and make sure that I got it, because something may happen. But I always try to respond to people. I don't ever delete any or not respond to them. More K24. I'm not going to do any more K24 all motor dyno testing. When I run the motor again, we might run it all motor just to make sure that it's still happy and doing what it's supposed to. The next series I'm going to do on the K24 we're going to be turning it up. We're going to be with another head gasket, head studs, bigger turbo, intercooler, ice water, a dedicated exhaust manifold, not the Super Richie homebrew one. And then we're going to keep turning it up and tuning it, and hopefully find out what the stock short block will take after we put ring gap in it. And that's the plan with the K24. I'm really excited about that. And I'm also excited about the 3800 Series 2. I'm excited about doing the big bang on that, but I'm actually more excited about doing the other stuff on it. The ported heads, the cam, the compound system, having the turbo blow through the blower, which is, I don't care if it's more efficient or less efficient. It's actually less efficient than a single turbo is, but still it's super cool because it's rare. I mean, there's lots of supercharged 3800 Series 2s running around. There's probably a few turbo ones, and there's even fewer compound systems running around. So that in itself, just being unique, has value to me. I think it's kind of cool. I don't know about Nicholas. I don't know about the TDO3s on a 3-liter and an HX35. I don't know if I've ever run an HX35. I've run some TDO3s, I think, but I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to answer that question that you're comparing those two, because I haven't run those. I haven't run that exactly. If you need faster spool up rate, use a ball bearing turbo. See, I haven't seen a big difference in spool rate between the same turbo using a conventional bearing setup and a ball bearing setup. I haven't seen one be more responsive than the other, because the amount of drag that's inherent once you have an oil film on a standard bearing versus a ball bearing, I don't think it's that great. I think if you could measure it and you saw more than 100 RPM, I would kind of be very surprised. But again, you guys can let me know. I just don't know of people that have actually done a real back-to-back test. And that's the kind of thing that I do, And I get lots of people that tell me, oh yeah, it's a big difference. Except they don't have any data to back that up. They have one that they ran, and then their buddies with a completely different setup on theirs is, oh, his doesn't spool till 500 RPM later. Yeah, but it's a smaller motor with no headers and a different cam and not ported heads and an automatic and, and a lot of things that are different. So I just haven't seen anybody show me a direct back-to-back test of a ball bearing versus a journal bearing and show me what the actual spool rate is and show some kind of big difference. I want there to be a big difference. In all of this testing, when I test 2 camshafts, I want there to be a big power difference between the cams, but I don't dictate that. The dyno tells me what actually happens, and then I just report that. So it's much better if I do that than if I try to make stuff up, because that's dumb, because a lot of guys are out there doing it, and that's just not me. Is a real short log style manifold more responsive than a smoother flowing longer one? JT Custom Knives. I don't think so. I don't think the length of the track has an effect on boost response. I know guys might argue with me about that, but if you look at you need to look at the flow rate of the 2 manifolds, and if one of them flows better, is that going to be more responsive? For instance, if we have a header, a long tube header, which might flow less than a shorty style header in ultimate flow, but it will make more power because it has a scavenging effect, and it still has a scavenging effect under pressure. So will it make more power and then be more responsive? So it's an interesting question. You guys can argue about that and tell me what you think. But what I think is, those are the kind of things that guys like to argue about and discuss, and that's kind of why we're here, because we're talking turbos. But what I think is, if you can get all of the exhaust to the turbo, then good things will happen. What size turbo for a 496 big block street truck with a 6-speed? See, Popeye's Ride, let me know what the power output is. The most important thing, and if we can get nothing else from this discussion on Let's Talk Turbos, when you have a question about turbo sizing for your application, tell me, these are some important things. First of all, what is your power output? How much power do you want to make? And then what are we working with? What is the motor that we're working with? And then kind of what is the application? It's a daily driver. It's a drag race only thing, whatever it is. So if you have a 496 and it's going to be, and it has a 225 at 50 camshaft in it and a dual plane and stock heads, that's a completely different turbo than a 496 with airflow research heads and a solid roller cam and a single plane intake that I want to make 2,000 horsepower with. Even though the motor size is the same, the application is completely different, and the turbos that I would recommend, turbos that I would recommend for that, are often just different. How long until the L67 testing? Tyler, we just need to get the L67 running, and the guys at West-Tech are kind of working on that. If we can get the EFI setup, which I think we can make the Holley work, we're going to have to trim teeth off of the factory crank trigger. And once we do that, and we can actually get the thing running, and as long as I'm able to tune it, I'm able to change the air fuel and change the timing, and it does what we want to do, then it will be fairly fast. But as soon as we get that working, then it should be no problem. What about AR ratio on the smaller twins being tighter versus the big single needing a larger AR? Well, that's the thing, William. You would need to adjust the turbo sizing, first of all, because that's the big change. And then you adjust the AR, which is a small change, of the 2 twins versus the single. And again, I think if you size them the same, I think you'll have spool rates that are very, very comparable. Do you think twins of back pressure, Jay Damien, do you think twins of back pressure is improved will also improve transition off boost to boost? I actually think if you have more back pressure, the boost response will improve. So more back pressure in that case probably will help you. But what will happen is they ultimately, if you have a lot of back pressure, it will make less power at the top. I noticed you never say anything about Corey. I know she never said anything about changing valves for turbocharging. Do the LS have different kind of valves? Have you tried any aluminum 5.3 LS boost? Yes. Your question about aluminum 5.3s. Yes, the L33, the HO version of the 5.3, will make a lot of power. It will make power comparable to an iron version of the 5.3. The other aluminum motors, we don't run over about 1,000 horsepower. The LS1, LS2, LS3, we don't run those motors. We don't try to make a lot of power with those. The mains seem to shift around on the block and stuff. Now, I just don't think they're as strong. But that L33 has really thick sleeves and stuff, and guys make a ton of power with those. I don't change the valves normally. We haven't done any valve changes. If I were running at Bonneville, I probably would put better valves in them, something that would take sustained heat. But for a dyno run or even for drag racing, a lot of guys are running stock heads and making lots and lots of power with stock heads and stock valves. By the way, I have the same glass, and it's for vodka. Gary, yeah, see, that's the thing. You can put whatever you want. You can hydrate with water. You could put vodka in there, I guess, if you wanted. Or you could also put Malibu rum or any kind of clear water-like liquid in there. Would work equally well. We need more small block Ford turbo component. T-Web, have you taken a look up there and saw what's up there? There are small block Ford turbos combinations up there. A Magnum Big Bang. Yeah, I'm rocket surgeon. I'm less interested in doing a Magnum Big Bang than I am doing more Magnum testing, first of all. And I want to run boost, obviously, on the beer keg deal, and want to do testing with a 360 Magnum, and then, cams and heads and all the normal stuff. I'm not really concerned with what that motor can do as an absolute thing. I don't know that a lot of guys I don't think there's a lot of guys out there running really high horsepower Magnum turbo motors. So I don't really know if that's a question, but we will run boost on it, because you have to. Yeah, you have to make a Super Ritchie turbo system for any motor that you put on there. 408 stroke or S480 or S485 is 1300 reasonable. Yeah, if you're going to do 1300, an S485 is the way I would go on a 408, and to make sure that you have enough hot side on a 408, especially if it's a good 408 that makes a 408 should be able to make 550 or 600 NA fairly simply if it's got good. I'm assuming an LS, if it's not, whether it is or not, if it has good heads and a good cam and good intake manifold on it, a 408 could easily make 600 or 550. I plan on making an LS intake to work on the 6.8 liter V10. Sure, I think Big Hirsch, I think you should do that. Everybody should make custom things. Looking for torque before 4,000 RPM. You should go with a supercharger on that, a positive displacement supercharger, and a mild cam if you're trying to do that. Will a given turbo support more power on less displacement? Sketchy GT. That's a good question. And the answer is yes, but only if you've reached the flow limit of the hot side of the turbo before you reach the compressor side. So if you have a back pressure issue, like for instance what we had with if you look at the video that I did of the GT45, I ran it both on a 454, a big block Chevy, and a 4.8 liter LS. And on that particular turbo, it will make more power on the 4.8, and actually on an even smaller motor, than it will on the 454, just because the exhaust back pressure gets so high before we're able to get to the basically 800 horsepower flow limit of the compressor side of that turbo. So I hope that answers your question. Proper fueling doesn't care about boost. I don't understand whether that's a question or a statement. What hot side would be a good starting point for twin GT45s on a 434-inch traditional Pontiac shooting for 1,200 horsepower at 6,000 RPM? I think the ones that we run are fine. I'm not even sure what the hot side is. And honestly, I don't know. This is for Scott K. I don't know if there are different hot sides available for those GT45s. I've only ever bought the ones that we bought. I think we bought probably 4 or 5 of them. They all came in the same configuration. Maybe that's just because we bought them from the same place. But if there are different hot sides, you're going to need something fairly good size, although you're running twins. So we ran those 2 GT45s that I have on a 454 big block, and they'll work really well, and they'll easily make 1,200. I don't know what happened to the Carcraft Malibu wagon. I'm not part of that Carcraft family. You have plans to turbo the 5.7 Hemi that was just on Engine Masters? No, I don't. That's not mine. That's theirs. That's the new 5.7. They just let me use the data for what I was doing. They did some cool stuff. I like the adjustable intake manifold. I like the fact that it has the newer heads on it, which make a lot of power. And you guys all saw, hopefully if you haven't taken a look at it, take a look at that Hemi comparison between the older version of the 5.7 and the more modern version of the 5.7. There's a big difference. They've come a long way in power on the new 5.7 Hemi. How do we size a turbo for horsepower? Kenny asks. You can ask me, or you can ask any of the turbo manufacturers. If you have a horsepower, if you say, I want to make 1,000 horsepower, they'll tell you what turbo that you need to make that with your engine size and your engine NA power output. It's once you determine those things, it's actually fairly easy to choose a turbo size. Garrett sizes the turbo hot side to match the compressor side. You don't have to guess on when it spools, just follow their recommendation. Yeah, you can follow their recommendation, but even Garrett has not tested all of their hot sides and all of their cold sides on all kinds of different applications. What they're giving you is math, and that's the reason that I test and the reason that I even have a job is because the real world, even the dyno, which is arguably is not the real world, but it's much better than a computer, tells you what's really happening. And a lot of times the math doesn't do that. Big Bang 6-liter, those were both T4 S475s. You know, you don't see a lot of 5.7 turbo Hemis. We should, because they work really well. They have good cylinder heads. They respond very well to camshaft. And if you put ring gap in them and don't blow up the piston, they work pretty well. I'm working on the 3.8 Big Bang. I can't wait to do that. That and the 2.4-liter Big Bang. I'll have more videos of the Nova coming up. I want to take it down to West Tech and actually get a motor in it so it can run around, although it does have big holes in the floor that I need to fix. I plan to go single turbo with an 89 on 3 kit on my 89302 carb setup. I'll need a standalone ECU for sure, right? This is my first boosted setup. Are you switching, DK Royalty, are you switching over to fuel injection, or are you going to run it as a blow-through carb? If you're running it as a blow-through carb, you can hook up the distributor and run a boost retard for timing and then tune a blow-through carburetor, and that also works. Your thoughts on a turbo 400M? Those are really long connecting rods, but I look at the 400M as a 400-inch stroke 351 Cleveland. So we made lots of power with it. If you port the heads and put a cam, and it's a 400-inch motor, so it makes good power. If you put even a set of 4V heads on it, it works good. Put 2 turbos on it. The RPM that we run the motor at is not going to determine whether you use singles or twins. Just the power output will determine that. So you can get what you need from a 400M, a turbo 400M, with either singles or twins. If you only need, let's say, 500 or 600 horsepower, then a single GT45 will work. If you want 1,000 or 1,200, then 2 of them will work. Or if you're in between there, then like an S475, a single S475 will also work. You want 450 rear-wheel torque, RWT. I'm assuming on a 5.7 Hemi before 4,000 RPM. You can do that. You can do that easily with a turbo, a small turbo. So smoking boosted deuce. I ran a racing single on my big block Chevy, then switched to 2 small turbos, and the twins spooled faster. And I got more boost. See, Lisa's here. Everybody say hello to Lisa. Hello, kiss. Hi. Everybody say hi.
I already made an appearance online. You didn't see me.
You did?
Yeah.
Have you made a comment? I'm just scrolling through the comments now.
Yeah.
I would have looked at yours. Does it say that you really like me?
It does.
Did
Talks about twins and turbo or supercharger.
I do like big twins.
Oh my gosh.
Big Bang Coyote. Yes, Aiden, we do want to see a Big Bang Coyote. Anyway, on your question about switching to two smaller twins, I'm not saying that you can't put up two twins in place of a single and make more response, but you've just changed the turbos, because you could have changed to a different single turbo also and done more, been more responsive. Okay, I'm gonna go down to the end here and see what's going on at the end. Have you in the past run a blow-through carb on a tunnel ram? I have not run a blow-through carb on a tunnel ram. Yes, she's a very pretty wife. I love her dearly. Do you think a cheap draw-through setup? I've never tried a draw-through setup. The problem is getting the turbo to work with that, and most of them are not sealed. How would I gap the rings on a 302? Put 28 to 30 thousandths gap in both the top and the second ring, and you'll be fine. 3800 projects coming along. We're just trying to get it running. We didn't do a big bang on the 3800. Running twins on a Honda K series. I don't know why you would. A single will make more than enough power on a K series. Oh, the GT45 is, thanks, Richard, available on a 105, a 115, and a 0.68. Now, that's really, really tight. Turbo Dad, go with an S7875 Gen 2 or an S475 for that kind of power level, and that will give you a little bit of extra. Can I make 1,000 horsepower on a Christopher Thompson? Can I make 1,000 horsepower on a 5330 over all stock in terms with twin 88s? You don't want twin 88s on a 5.3. A single 88 would make 1,000 horsepower. We didn't really lose much power, and I haven't put that video up on the Cadillac going from Albuquerque to down here to West Tech from 6,000 feet to 700 feet. I'm going to do a video on that and talk about what happened when I did that and one of the mistakes I made. What happened if I go over max math voltage? Topping out the mass air meter is bad. You need to put a splitter on it or something. We didn't build the 3800. It's just a stock one from the wrecking yard. Fuel distribution on single plane versus dual plane. I did do that. I did it NA and under boost, and they're both terrible. See, Tim, draw-through turbos have spring seals. Blow-through has dynamic seals, less drag. Boosted Boys has twin GT35s on a Toyota MR2. Is the MR2 a 2-liter? And GT35s are like 500 horsepower turbos, so they're. But if they're good ones, they could be even more. If they're actually Garrett GT35s, if they're eBay ones, they're 500 or so horsepower turbos, and you could get 2 of those to spool up with the 2-liter. An S475 on a rear mount, 16 pounds on a C6 Corvette. That's good. Don't peg the math. Yeah, that's a bad thing. 450 horsepower with a 400 and Vortec heads. Yes, if you put the right cam in it, you can do that. Oversized injectors over an FMU. I don't know anybody that runs FMUs anymore, although I would definitely do it because I have one, and I think it's OG. I ran my Mustang with one for 42 minutes straight at wide open throttle under boost at the Silver State, and it worked fine. I had the fuel pressure gauge pegged at 100 psi. I don't know how high it was because it was just bending the needle. The Stump 75, the 54 454-11 cam, you can find that online. That Comp has that. They still sell the cam. It's still available. All you have to do is put those numbers in the search for a Comp cam, and Summit sells it. Everybody sells it. Probably Amazon even sells it. a K20 head on a K24. We don't need to do that. We're just going to run a ported K24 head. That'll be enough to show how much power the stock bottom end will take. I was out there when Big Red ran the very first Silver State. I was out there for the first 12 years, or for the first 12 races. It was a lot of fun out there at that Silver State. Jake, you don't want to have something that automatically adjusts timing and air fuel mixture. I've never seen anything that automatically adjusts timing. 650 to 700 horsepower is Nate in a 5.3 is right in that GT40's like wheelhouse of the GT45, the eBay one that we ran. GFP Racing, you can run carbs. I think I have a carb turbo video up on a 5.3. You can run a blow through carb on a LS on any motor, and we, as a matter of fact, we have the same carburetor that we run on all of these blow through combinations. It's from CSU, but other people make blow through carbs, and you can do tuning on it just like you do anything else. If it's lean, you add more jet or change the position of the boost reference power valve. In the case of the CSU one, it's not hard. A solid, no, you don't need a solid roller. A hydraulic roller for a 400 horsepower or 450 horsepower, 400-inch small block with a Vortec head. A hydraulic roller will work fine. On a turbo 6-liter LS, we normally run either, and everyone's going to hate this, but we run Denso Iridium plugs. I ran all those on the Big Bang motors just because we had them. They were IQ31s, which is a really cold plug. It's about a heat range 10. But we've also run other ones too from the low run, lots and lots of boost. Jonathan Smith, a rotating assembly. The guys at Summit have good rotating assemblies for those. If you could only get cast pistons unless you point it for a custom forge. Tim Swanson, we run cast pistons on all of the stock bottom end stuff. That's what they all are. They're all cast pistons, so they work fine. I wouldn't change them to another cast piston. I would just run the stock ones. Did you consider testing a stock 3.5 EcoBoost turbos on a pushrod V8? I don't have any of those turbos, and I don't think you're going to find those in the wrecking yard. That's a pretty new motor. For the 4200 inline six, definitely we have. Thank you for posting that. We're definitely working on that. That will be super cool. What size turbo? Big block Ford 460 for 1,000 horsepower. That's the same as everything else. That's an S480 turbo or an S475. And we probably will put something on a 429 because my buddy Mark Sanchez has a 429 that he pulled out, and it's even an early, like a 1970 high compression one. So we're going to run that and put a cam and do stuff in it, and then put a turbo on, and not run a ton of power. It's not my motor. We don't have to make as much power as we can out of every combination, but doesn't your wireless controller you had on LS adjust everything automatically? No, Jake, we we adjust all of that. I determine what the air fuel is, and I determine what the timing is. It doesn't do that by itself. Kevin scored a 2007 4200. That's nice. I like those motors. I can't wait after the guys showing me what the flow rates of the heads are and all that kind of stuff. I'm real excited about doing that 4.2 liter inline 6-cylinder. We did figure out what the fuel supply was. It was the fuel supply problem from the dyno. The pumps were just kind of maxed out at that really high pressure. I have a 302, 80-pound injector, 70-millimeter turbo, TrickFlow 225 heads. It depends on what the power output you want, but I would go toward that Extreme Energy 274 cam that I recommend for anything. You go a little bit bigger than that, depending on how much power that you want. But with a turbo, you can make as much power as you want, even with that camshaft. The 466 big block Ford, yeah, you can do 1200 to 1400 horsepower. It's all going to depend on the turbos. You want a fairly decent motor, but a 460-inch Ford with a good cam and heads and stuff in it, you should easily be able to do, 500 or 600 horsepower or something like that. And then once you add boost to it, you get to that number pretty quickly with a reasonable amount of boost. Is there a factory turbo? Yeah, there's lots of factory turbos that you can find on diesel engines and on Saabs and on any kind of turbo thing. It's just that they're usually sized for smaller motors, unless it's a big diesel engine. What cheap programmer? Jake, I don't know what you're trying to do. I don't know exactly what you're trying. We run a Holley HP setup. If you're trying to go cheap, I wouldn't do that. Best response turbo, 500 wheel horsepower, K24. Did you watch the K24 turbo thing that we did? We ran 4 different turbos. That 62 millimeter. I might go with something even smaller. But the 62 millimeter for 500 wheel horsepower would be pretty good because that's kind of right in the wheelhouse for that thing. You might go with a GT35 style that might get you to 500 wheel horsepower. Prefer MAF or speed density. We always run speed density on the dyno just so the MAF is not in the way in terms of airflow. And I always run everything on a Holley or some kind of management system, so it's a lot easier to tune that way. So if you had to choose between a 2012 aluminum 5.3, is a 2012, is that a new DI motor? Or a Gen 3? I would pick the 6-liter. You're going to put 2 76 millimeters on it. That's an awful lot of turbo if they're real 76s. Years ago, I had an 86 SVO 2.3 liter. I've run those turbos, those SVO Mustang turbos on Hondas a lot back in the day. Have you ever run a proper compound setup? James, wow, that hurts a little bit. Did you see the compound setup we did on the 4.8? It's just turbos I had laying around. An LS doesn't really need a compound turbo setup. We made 1,500 horsepower with a stock bottom end 6-liter, so I don't know why you would need to do a lot more than that. Certainly not on a stock bottom end, because you're just going to break something. TI small block started in 2014. See, Andy knows what's up. Have you thought about doing different? Jonathan wants to know if I thought about different valve angle heads and canted valves. We do that on big blocks, obviously, and on Cleveland's, but not on an LS. I haven't ever run any canted valve stuff on an LS. I mean, given the amount of airflow that we have, usually we have way more cylinder head than we have power, especially on an NA application. Of a 5.7 Gen 3 Hemi. You want to know how much I can get a 383 stroker? You can get a lot. They have a lot of cylinder head flow. You just put lots of camshaft in it. There's lots of good intake manifolds for a Hemi. They can make a lot of power. Would a 4.8 benefit from a stock 6-liter cam? Mason, actually, the early 6-liter cam is the same as the LR4 cam and the same as the LM7 cam. A later 6-liter cam, especially a LQ9 cam, is a little bit better, but it's going to lose bottom end compared to the LM7 or LR4 cam. You'd be better off getting a real cam, like a small torque cam or truck cam or something for the 4.8. Take a look at the video I have up on all the stock cams. You can see what they did on a 4.8, and you can kind of extrapolate what they did, what they would do on or what they all did on a 5.3. Then you can kind of extrapolate what they would do on a 4.8. 750 crank horsepower, 388. Yeah, that's easy with boost. Jake, you can run that. You can run 10 pounds on a 5.3 with a stock ECU. Take a look over what Matt does over at Sloppy. They do good stuff. He's got tunes that they just give away for nothing, and they will get you, I'm sure, really close. A 12 to 1 460, can I turbo it? Sure, but you need really, really good fuel. And I don't know why you would want to. That's obviously leaning more toward, you're kind of in no man's land at 12 to 1. It's not quite a real race motor like 14 or 15 to 1. And it's not low enough to where you really should be running boost on it unless you have E85 or some sort of really high octane race fuel in it. How does gear ratio affect spool time? Well, because spool time is different in different gears. Obviously, if you change the rear end gear, you'll also have a similar kind of effect. 1,000 horsepower 351 Windsor, an S475 or an S480 if it's a single, and then 2 of those GT45s would work good on a 351 Windsor also if you're looking for 1,000 horsepower. Yes, you can, Mark. You can make 1,000 horsepower with the stock block on a 454. That's not a problem. Mark wants a video on a 5.3 with a turbo for towing. Then you just put a stock cam in it and put a really small turbo on it if you want boost down low below 3,000 RPM. But your tune is going to have to be spot on, or you're just going to detonate the thing to death. What is the best turbo for a small block Ford? 302, making 550. That eBay GT45 that we used on the video that's up with a 302 makes right at 550. So it's a perfect combination. 600 horsepower. Again, that's an eBay GT45 or something similar. That works good. Can an NA53 with 500 horsepower be streetable? It takes a lot of camshaft to make 500 horsepower with a 5.3. So it's going to be a pretty big camshaft in it. Yeah, 12.25 to 1 compression on E85 with a blow through is fine. If you look at all of the stuff that people turbocharge an LS3, all of that's fairly high compression. Rick Chastain's waiting on the awesome 292. I know, I want to get that back up on the dyno and get it in the car. Have you seen a 3622 stroke, Jonathan, and a 4125 bore? Yes, I think that's like a 388, right? That's the guys from Brian Tooley do those for their drag race motors. I think that they make a lot of power with those. Kyle wants to know about testing a 94 107 millimeter turbo. We don't have a lot of motors that can max that out. I mean, we've done big bang stuff obviously before, but I tend not to go to 1,500 horsepower or stuff. I don't. It's not really a gee whiz thing for me anymore. $850 horse, 383 stroke, or 8.3 to 1 compression. Yeah, with boost, it will definitely do that. Can I make 500 horsepower and just motor with a 351 Cleveland 4V heads? Yes, a stock 351 Cleveland 4V head flows 275 CFM, so it's more than enough to make 500 horsepower. Why are people only talking about horsepower? They should be talking about torque because that's what moves the car. Yes, it's just work over time, but these things make torque too. That's a nice thing about a turbo, and that you don't have to rev it. And anytime, if you take a look, and I've had all of these discussions when we talk about camshafts, and that's why every cam is a turbo cam. And I think I'm obliged to say that every time I have a video, that every cam is a turbo cam. But if you take the NA power output and the NA torque curve, because we're talking about torque, and you add boost to it, you just elevate everything. That's why I tell people that whatever cam you have in there, whatever the power curve is NA, if you just elevate that, that's what boost does. And that's the thing that a lot of guys don't do. They will put together a turbo motor and run it and go, yeah, this thing worked great. Well, they don't know what it works great compared to anything else because they've never compared it to anything. They haven't swapped a bunch of cams on the dyno. They didn't run it NA. They only ran it turbocharged, and it worked great. Yeah, it worked great compared to what? We don't know what it worked. We don't know if it worked great or not. But if you add boost to it, there's a good chance it will work great, even if it's only not as great as it could be. What are your thoughts on Ford's new 7.3 compared to the LS? I don't need to compare engine families against each other. I want everything to make power. And that 7.3, Evan and those guys over there seem to be doing pretty well with that. And Brian, they're making good power. And it's no magic. It's not that one engine family is superior or anything like that. That's just foolish thinking. If you have an internal combustion engine and you get head flow and you get cam timing and you get the intake manifold with the right runner length and flow, it's going to make power. That's what they do. Every motor does that. EGT sensors help tune each cylinder with a wideband. Yep, that's a good idea. VS 80 millimeter on LQ4, no ring gap. How much reliable power can I make before I bend a rod or piston? I don't think you're going to bend a rod. I think you're going to break a ringland. But people always want to know how much boost can I run without changing the ring gap. You can run as much as you want. The problem is you don't know what the ring gap is if you don't take it apart. And then also, it's not boost versus ring gap. It's ring temperature. And then what you do to increase the ring temperature is not just boost. It's time at boost, how much power you're making for how long. There's a lot of things that come into play. How much timing you had to take out, how much back pressure you have. There are a lot of things that affect whether or not that the ring gap is going to butt together and snap the piston, because that's what will happen. You won't break a rod. I mean, we made 1,543 horsepower with stock rod. So if everything is right, you're not going to break a rod. But if you don't have ring gap, you'll definitely break a piston. An HX40 turbo too small for a 302. I have no idea. I've never run an HX40 turbo. I don't know what they were on or what they flow. I don't know anything about them, unfortunately. I could make something up, but I just don't think it would be a good idea. I know people say you're destroying the motor, but I've always wanted to see a 327 stroke. Are you talking about the 4.8 stroke? Because if you're talking about that on a 425 bore, I did that with a 4065 or a 4070 bore, and just having a bigger bore would, having the LS7 bore with a 4.8 crank, you could do that, but it just makes less power than having the big stroke in there. Yeah, budget outlaws, you should be fine at 11.2-1 with the 85. I don't know about the 14 pounds. It's not boost versus compression, it's detonation. So if you don't have detonation at that power level and compression level, you should be fine. What turbo do you recommend? New cam adds 71 horsepower. Again, T-dub, what is your power level? How much power do you want to make? That determines. If you put an S475 in it, then you can go to 1,000. A GT45, you can go to 750 or so on a 6-liter. So it depends on what kind of power you want. $7,875 Gen 1, good size for a 347. 500 wheel horsepower. Yeah, that's pretty good. That would work. I think the GT45 might spool better than that at 500 wheel horsepower, because that's still going to kind of be in the wheelhouse for that thing. But yeah, I like the 7875. It works good. Austin wants to know about inner chillers. I've never used one of those. I think that's the brick that you put in sandwich in between on the high ram deal. I've never run one of those, but a lot of guys have run those on the old Roots blowers and stuff on big blocks. Anything that you can do to reduce the charge temperature is a good idea. I just don't know how they compare to running it through kind of like the air to water intercooler that we use, which is that CX Racing one, or depending on the power level, the one from the guys at ProCharger. Can I run boost on my small block Chevy 420Q 11.2-1? Yeah, you can. With Larry, with enough octane, you can run boost on anything. Keen to see single versus twins on a Viper V10. I've never seen a Viper V10 in the junkyard. I have seen a Magnum V10 in the truck. I saw one in my life, but I didn't pick it up. That's turbo size for a 3-liter N54. That's a BMW. 66 for 800 horsepower. It'd have to be a really good 66 to go to 800 horsepower, but there are some that will do that. Twin GT28s on a 1JZ, that should be good. Compressed air, that's really good. The compressed air supercharging guys want me to do something with them. Those guys are really cool, and that system is amazing. If you have negative 100-degree charge temperatures, it does really good things for power. Yeah, Project Iron, I want them. That's why we're doing a Q&A session. I want them all to ask questions. I have about 5 more minutes, and I have to get going because as you people have seen, my wife Lisa is here, and I need to get back to see her. Is the VS 7887 on a built? I'm going to limit RPM. Mine runs out of steam around 6,700 at 22 pounds, and I'd like to rev it to 7,200. Your RPM limit is not going to be, although, well, a 78 or a 75 millimeter turbo at 22 pounds on a 5.3. I'm assuming that this thing has a cam and stuff in it. You're probably out of turbo. I would guess at 22 pounds, that thing's probably not going to make any more power. 706 makes more, let's see. .706 makes more NA than the 243 head under boost, but does the reduced flow of the 76 change, which makes more power? You're splitting hairs really between a 706 and a 243. A 706 on a 5.3 makes more power than a 243 does. It's the chamber size, the diameter of the 706 is better. It's smaller, so it has a little bit more compression. Not a lot. The 243 has a little bit more flow, but once you add pressure to that, that additional flow offered by the 243 doesn't come into play anymore until way, way high in terms of power. So I like using the 706 head because it came with the motor that I got from the wrecking yard, and I don't have to buy 243 heads. And so if there's almost no difference until you get really, really high in the power output, why would I want to put another set of heads on there? Any updates on the baby LT1? Yes, I'm actually just waiting for the guys at TPIS to send me the tune port, the L98 tune port manifold, so I can run it on that L99, which will be super cool because I think that's what that motor really needs. It needs more runner length because on the intake, as we saw when I compared the dual plane to the stock LT1 intake, which is really short runner and doesn't belong on that on that motor. I'll try one last time, Force 5.3 with a 2cc dome at 1,200 wheel horsepower, 243 head, or 862. Either one of them will make that power with ease. You should stop concentrating on the head and start concentrating on power. We know because we've done that. We've done that a lot. And you can do that with a stock head, or you can do that with a ported head or a modified head, whatever you want. But either one of those heads will do that. What do you think twin turbo 7875 on an LY6 escaping, and how much boost will those? Well, a 7875 will get near 1,000 horsepower. So 2 of them, you're talking about 2,000 horsepower. And I don't know what you should stop thinking about in terms of boost, because the boost is going to be a function of whatever the NA power output is, and then how much boost it took to get to whatever the maximum flow rate of those 2 turbos is. So if you make 500 horsepower and those 2 turbos will make 2,000, then it'll take that amount of boost to get to 2,000 horsepower. 0.92 or 0.72 air for a stock K24, or which one would you run at 500 horsepower? Well, it depends on what turbo you're talking about. And also it depends on what you want to do with it. If you want to be more responsive, obviously a 0.72. If you want to be less responsive, then a 0.92. What's going on with the 5.7 LT1? I don't have a 5.7 LT1 yet. I need to get one from the wrecking yard, so then I can do some testing with the LT1 and we'll make more power with it. But then I'm most interested in doing the internal swap with the LT1 and the L99 to make a DZ302, a late model Gen 2 DZ302, and a 305, which will be super awesome. GT45 and a mild cam would be good for a 3/4 ton truck application. I haven't tested the stock intake on a Vortex small block, not the Spider assembly deal, because I just don't think you can get enough fuel with that fuel injection setup. The 15 pounds with ring gap on a Hemi is not going to be a function of, that's going to be a function of the octane of the fuel, and not, I mean, you want to have the ring gap there, but whether or not it requires race gas is an octane thing. I don't think you can get to, well, you can get to 15 pounds on 93 octane. You just won't have very much timing in it. Twin M112s on a 6-liter. You can do that. Okay, we got about 1 more minute. Yeah, I know, Spider injection. I'm not a fan. A whole set, HX60, 78 millimeter, 108 on the small block 3. Yeah, that should spool fine. Yeah, compression ratio has the same effect. It adds power everywhere, basically 3 to 4% per point of compression, but only in the sweet spot, only in the from about 8-to-1 to 12-to-1. After that, it gets to be less. Hi, Lise. I know, I can't wait to drive the Nova too. Okay, guys, I got to say goodnight. Thanks for joining me, especially Lisa. That girl's kind of cute. I'm gonna have to see what's up with her. Thanks for joining me, guys. We're going to try to do this every Tuesday. It's going to be Turbo Tuesday, so we're going to talk turbos and find out what's going on. And you guys, I want you guys to join me and let me know, because I get a lot of good information for you. I get information for different videos that I want to do, ones that I need to redo. And as you see, if you take a look at the video that I just posted, it's actually a redo of a video that I already did. I take that back. This one is not. The previous one, where I ran the GT45, was a video that I'd already done. So, it was only 2 minutes long. So I wanted to put lots of good information in there, because it was when I first started the channel, and I obviously want the videos to be better. And 2 minutes was not enough to tell that story. It simply was not. I want to thank all you guys for coming, and we'll see you guys next Tuesday. Thanks, man.